Welcome back to the Fly Culture Podcast with me, Pete Tigers. I hope you're good and I hope you're looking forward to what is to come this year. My guest today needs little introduction. She's a fly angler and mega talented artist whose work I'm sure you'll know. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Andrea Larko. Andrea, it's great to have you here. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for talking with me today. Can you tell listeners a little bit about where you're based and what that means from a fishing perspective?
I am based in southwestern Pennsylvania. So from a fishing perspective, that means there's a lot of amazing water that is nearby. We're not as well known as some other places in the United States, but I think Pennsylvania is it goes under the radar. A lot of people don't know how much water there is and how many wild trout there are here. So we kind of like to keep it a little private, but it's still some of the most amazing fly fishermen have come out of this area. So it's hard to keep it a secret, but my home waters are definitely fantastic. It's not difficult for me to just say, I want to go fishing and drive 5 minutes and be on a stream with wild trout. So I'm very lucky.
You're perfectly safe here because nobody's listening, so you'll be absolutely fine. Your home waters are completely safe. So does that mean that you're able to fish throughout the winter as well?
I do fish throughout the winter as well, yes. There are waters that are stocked that you're not able to fish until opening day, which is in the spring. But there are a lot of waters that aren't stocked by the state, so they're open year-round for catch and release fly fishing.
And you say you've got a stream just 5 minutes away. And I get this, like you say, I don't know so much about the landscape there. Does that mean that there's a number of streams that you can go hit?
There's at least 3 different streams that are 5 minutes from my house. I'm at the north of the Appalachian Mountains on the very northern end. Well, I'd say northwestern end. It does go up farther into the U.S., but with the mountains around here, there's a lot of fantastic water. So even within driving about an hour from my house, there are, I want to say probably, it's hard to post. It's hard to say. When we fish around here, there's something we do called blue lining, and it's kind of a Pennsylvania thing. I don't know if you've heard about it.
Yep.
But we look for a blue line on a map and just go there and see if there's trout there. So that's something I can do around here. And within 10 or 15 minutes of my house, last time I decided to go blue lining and tag some places, I had dozens of places tagged on my phone and pins dropped to see if there were trout in those waters and to scout them. So the thing is, it depends on what you're fishing for. You can easily fish some of the larger waters for bigger trout, or if you're looking for native species and brook trout, you can easily hit so many small streams that just look like you could probably jump over them, but there's a lot of brook trout in those waters too.
And a brook is one of your favorites?
I would say either a brook trout or a brown trout. Brook trout are more, they'll take whatever's given to them. They're opportunistic. If you throw a fly in there and it's your first cast, you'll probably have a brook trout rise. But to me, brown trout are very elusive. I feel like they're very smart. They outsmart me a lot. So brown trout are kind of they're my go-to whenever I'm fly fishing. That's what I'm usually trying to target is the brown trout. If I catch browns, then I feel like I know I'm doing something right, especially if they're wilds.
And you talk about the mountains there, and I'm thinking about snow-capped peaks or probably snow everywhere. What are those winter mornings like when you're out on the river looking for that elusive brown trout?
Well, there's definitely snow everywhere right now, but where I live, the mountains aren't peaked in snow. They're more large hills and valleys. But right now, what I'm just looking for when I go fishing in the winter or any time is just some serenity and some peace. So I enjoy the calm and the quiet when I go fishing. And something about the snow in the winter just makes everything so silent. There aren't as many animals out. There isn't as much activity. It's very much more a mindful experience when I fish in the winter.
So do you find being out is good to clear the head, but is it also, can it be a source of artistic inspiration too?
Oh, it definitely is. That's why I started doing this as a living because it was such an artistic expression, just in a different form. Um, I find being on the water, you have to be very mindful of your surroundings and what is going on. And that happens whenever I get in the zone when I'm painting or working on an art piece. It's kind of like that same feeling. So I wanted to express what it felt like when I was fly fishing to what it was like when I'm doing my artwork because they're very similar. And I think they reflect each other very well. So I would definitely call fly fishing an art form. I think it's very meditative and you definitely have to be mindful while you're on the water.
Absolutely. And do you find then from being out on the river that the creative process comes to you? But do you notice the reason I'm asking this question or setting this question up is that I've had a lot of creative people on here. And I know myself, if I'm going to write something, I find that if I'm really super happy, I'm not as creative. But when I'm on a slight downswing, feel much more creative and can express myself much better that way. I couldn't understand why, but do you find there's anything in those cycles of how you're feeling that are akin to that creative process?
Oh, definitely. Yes. It's very hard for me to concentrate and do my artwork if I'm not mindful with a lot of the things that I do that are very detail oriented. So if something else is on my mind and it's bothering me, it's hard for me to focus and do that, which is why I also like to do it because it forces me to give me that patience. And I feel like fly fishing does the same thing. But as far as emotions go, I think I tend to paint and draw more when I'm excited about something or happy about something. I will on the downswing too if I'm just not feeling it as much. I feel like that'll kind of get me out of my head more and that ability to be able to express myself definitely helps more. But if I'm feeling in the depths of winter when it's dark very early and I may be a little bit more depressed, it's hard for me to find the motivation and the creativity to be artistic. So in the winter, sometimes usually my breaks are reading. I like to spend more time reading in the winter than doing artwork. I feel like it gives my mind kind of a break and as well as just kind of refueling that creativity side, which is also why I like to fly fish in the winter because it kind of rejuvenates me, especially after the holidays usually get so busy and I just kind of need some time off from art for a little bit.
Yeah, it's always good to step away from work just in a short time. And
Yeah.
you talk about the mindfulness of it as well. And so, what can trigger that artistic moment? Could it be a fish? Could it be a good cast? Could it actually just be turning up at that river and that triggers something, or is it a combination of all of those things, perhaps?
Oh, I think it's a combination of all of them. 90% of the time is just being able to get out and be on the water, be on the river. Something about standing in water is very healing for me. It's But I would have to say that it's the entire experience. It's something that I try and portray in my artwork from the meditative feeling and relaxation of just being able to be outdoors and be on water and not have all these things going on in the back of your head, which what you have to do and your responsibilities and other things going on in your life. Which usually for the first half hour, 45 minutes I'm on the water, those are still in my mind. And it takes me a bit of time to kind of adjust and settle into my environment. So, but I think once I settle in and I kind of become more mindful and I'm paying more attention to my cast and I'm paying more attention to what I'm fishing and the weights that I'm using, or if I'm not, or if I'm fishing dries and my mend, and I'm able to be more mindful and in the moment, that's when I see the benefits of what I'm doing. That's when I'll catch those fish. And that's when I feel that excitement. And that's when everything else just doesn't matter and goes out the window. So those are the moments that I really live for. But I'll take being on the water and not catching a fish any day. It's still better than working.
Too right, too right. And it's that drive home after that as well, isn't it? Where you get almost a, and many of the listeners will know this as well, and particularly at winter time, I guess, when sun is in short supply, that you're driving home and you do feel refreshed, you do feel reinvigorated and ready to go in whatever direction that you need to go, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. Especially being an introvert, it really fills my cells back up to be able to keep going through the day and give me more energy and more motivation, and I feel more creative. It's just something that has it's kind of been a rejuvenator for me ever since I was a kid. I've been fishing since I was a kid. It's always been that way. It never changed. I'm happy it didn't.
It's interesting you use the word introvert as well, because your artwork is the exact opposite. And is that a way of expressing that nature of you?
I feel like most of the time I am very introverted. I like my downtime. I think I kind of recharge my batteries in solitude. I feel like a lot of artists are probably that way. Um, Expressing how I express myself through my artwork, there's many different styles, mediums that I can use when I'm creating something. But I would have to say the thing is what I put on my social media and what I have for sale through my shop and online is very different than the work I do for myself. Um, they're complete opposites on the spectrum as far as I'm concerned, which I think is very interesting because it gets to show that the feelings that I have when I'm fly fishing and I'm excited about something versus, the other side of art and life and, things that I would just rather keep to myself that I don't share publicly. And a lot of the times I don't even look back on things that I'm working on and put in sketchbooks. They're just for me and then they end up on a shelf or, it's just something expressive. Most of it's abstract and not very, I'm trying to think of the word for it. It's a lot more expressive than what I'm doing, but it's also a bit darker than my colorful works that I use in my business. So it's very interesting that dichotomy because they're definitely very opposite.
We'll move on to the artwork shortly, but I just wanted to come back to the fishing side of it. And I was thinking about what you said about the streams and not much angling pressure. Does that mean in your area there's much of a fishing community?
um, there is a fishing community locally. We have some Trout Unlimited chapters, and there are communities of fishermen in the area. I think a lot of the fishermen that are around here that are conventional tackle usually like to fish stocked streams and right after opening day. And then, a month or so in, it kind of gets more challenging. There aren't as many fish to catch. And that's usually when I tend to go fishing just to kind of stay away from the people and the crowds. Because being on the water is not a time when I want to be in a community of people. In certain experiences at certain times it is, but for the most part, that's more me time and more solitude time. But there are a lot of definitely wonderful communities around fly fishing in my area. Even at my local fly shop, I'm friends with the owner there, and there's a group of regulars there that we're all very close. We get together and hang out, every weekend, and it's great. But I have yet to go fishing with any of them. So that's it's very interesting. I think everyone has a different aspect of what they enjoy in their life, and fishing included. If it's more of a group thing, if people just want to do it, with just their friends and go out and relax that way, or if it's something that, for me, it's something that more is soothing for my soul, and I like to do it alone because I find it as a more meditative experience.
And you're incredibly well connected within the fly fishing community as a whole across the US there. And I was fascinated to get an understanding of how you feel fly fishing looks in the US, because I think about COVID time, and I was talking to Mark Bale over at Farbank during then, and he said we're seeing, just as they were opening the country up to be able to travel a little bit more, he said it's like the film again. It's like the film, that everyone was taking it up. And we had a similar sort of thing, that there was a short spike that has flattened back out again. But I think one of the differences in the US and UK is that all that public land that you have there that allows people to travel and fish a whole lot more easily. But how do you sense that the fly fishing landscape looks in the US to you right now?
Well, I kind of have a narrow view on it since I don't travel often to fly fish where I live because since I do have such great water close by. But I did notice during and shortly after COVID, there was definitely an influx and a lot more people on the water, um, which I think was a fantastic thing because I feel like fly fishing can be so beneficial to people that I think everyone should try it. So I thought it was fantastic that that happened. I'm not sure if that's how it was across the rest of the country, but as far as my business goes, I did see, you know, more business on my side as well after that. So it made me feel like more people were getting into fly fishing. And I had a lot of people that messaged me and started following my work that said that they had just gotten into it during and after COVID because it was something that they didn't have to be around a lot of other people to do, and to learn. And they could learn online or they could practice at home by themselves in their yard. And so I feel like that's the best part about it is it's not something you have to have a big group or a big following to do. And it's something you can teach yourself, which I think is why after COVID, it kind of we did see a spike in it. Um, but I saw more orders from all across the world. It wasn't just the US. So I'm wondering if the same thing happened there too.
Yeah, we definitely had some of that happening. And I think it was one of those things that allowed people to go out and travel a little bit. And rod license sales went up and then they've gone back down again. And it's a shame that we didn't see that follow through that perhaps many of us hoped that would be there. But sadly, it didn't work, I think, in that way. And I'm always trying to understand how it looks. And of course, we look towards the US as a big marketplace, a varied marketplace. And I like to try and understand if that's happening there. I wonder if there's anything we can transfer to here to encourage more people to come into it. So that's why I quite often ask that question to try and understand it just a little bit more. But thank you for that.
That's a good
And
question. I do think that did you see Mending the Line, the recent
I
movie?
haven't because I can't get it anywhere. So if anyone listening
Oh,
can tell me
really?
where, so I think it's on one streaming service, but I don't think I've got it. I'm so old and out of touch that I've
Oh,
only
well,
had
it was
Netflix
on.
recently.
Yeah, it was on Netflix and it went to number one on Netflix and it became incredibly popular. And I saw it was kind of like a river runs through it all over again. And since it also dealt with people that were in the military and PTSD and how healing fly fishing was, I feel like after that movie came out and went number one, that definitely had a significant impact on fly fishing as well. And I know that those trends tend to level out over time because, it is just kind of fleeting for some people. But A River Runs Through It when I was a kid was something that touched me and never left. So hopefully for some other people, it did the same thing.
Yeah, I think they're there, and we're probably seeing some of those people who came in on that spike are a little bit older now. So perhaps they're not fishing in quite the same way. And it may be films like Mending the Line have brought newer, younger people in. And I think that's where our issue always has been, is that the very young people, there's these great schemes in place to put a rod in people's hands and youngsters' hands, more importantly. They go away for a bit and then perhaps come back in their late 20s, 30s, where they might have a little bit more time. And it's reigniting that. And I think it's interesting we're talking about these things because I think they're the things that probably reawaken those feelings for people to say, yes, I want to do it. So perhaps we need every now and again those films to bring people back into it. So really, really interesting points. But also I wanted to move on to your personal fishing because you said that you have fished a large portion of your life. Was there a moment when you thought actually fly fishing, yes, this is for me? Was there a defining moment or a tipping point that you suddenly thought, yes, this is me?
Oh, the first time I cast a fly rod. That was it. I mean, that was it. It was so different. I'd been fishing all my life. I picked up a fly rod. It was in 2009. And that experience was so different from conventional fishing that I'd grown up to. Just, it captured me. And um, I I couldn't get enough. I started tying flies. I started doing a little research on it. I taught myself. So I, watched videos online and I like to read books, like I said. So I read a lot about it and I went to my local fly shop and the owner was very welcoming. And anytime I had a trouble figuring out how to tie something, like I remember one time I couldn't figure out how to tie post wings and I went in there and he took the time to show me how to do it. So it was really great to have him as a mentor through the way. But I think it feels so different to fly fish than conventional fishing because you have to be so much more aware of your surroundings. At least that's how it came across to me. And that was something that I think I really needed in my life at that time. I had just moved back from New York to Pennsylvania and I decided to take up fishing just to get out of the house. I hadn't found a job yet and I just needed to get out of the house and do something. And I had been living in a city for years, so I hadn't fished in quite some time. And I was like, I just need to get back on the water, clear my head. It's always been nice to just go fishing and clear my head, but fly fishing took it to a whole different plateau. And I was stuck right from the get-go.
That sounds perfect to me. And for you, how do you like to fish? Would it be a dry? Would it be a dry dropper? Would it be nymphs? Would it be streamer? Any of the above? All of the above? What is your perfect day that you like to set out and fish?
Uh, that's the best part about fly fishing is I'm still learning, and you'll always be learning. When I started, I liked dry droppers fishing for brook trout. That's what I still fish is a dry dropper for brook trout. If I'm fishing water that's really fast, I'm either going to throw in a streamer or I'm going to swing it or I'm going to nymph it. It really depends on where I am, the stream I'm going to, what I'm targeting, and what I'm looking to get out of it, and what the flows are. And that's the best part about it is it's always changing. But that's also great for fly tying because it gives me a lot of time and more time to tie flies too because you'll never learn enough there either, which I also enjoy. So it feels like if you start fly fishing, I don't think people realize the rabbit hole they fall into because you'll never know it all. And there's so many different ways to fish. Whenever I was in Alaska, I was fishing dry flies and then I was um, using wet flies, which I thought was a lot of fun. It's not really conventional when you go to Alaska to fish, nymphs or regular flies or wet flies. For some people, they go up there to use beads and flesh flies, but I like the challenge. So I'm just constantly feeling like I need to challenge myself to grow in aspects of my life. And in fly fishing, that's definitely one of them as well.
That's the perfect answer. Fish what is appropriate for that day. Perfect answer. Do you find, and for me, I know I'm speaking from my personal standpoint, but I think fly fishing to me is so attractive because, as you say, we can never get fully on top of it. There's always something new that we can learn. There might be another aspect. It might be rod building. It might be fly tying. It might be writing. It may lead into art. It may lead us somewhere else. Do you think that's why it's attractive to you too?
I definitely think so. I think I'm a student of life and I always like to learn new things. So when I got into fly fishing, there are so many things to learn, not just on the water and different types of casts and how to read the water and where the fish lie, but the different types of flies and the weights on them and choosing whether or not to use the weight and how you're casting each one of those flies. There's just so much to it that I felt like I would never get bored. And I haven't gotten bored. If anything, it's just drawn me in more to want to learn more about it. Because I've saltwater fished a little bit, but that's a whole other side. I've barely even touched yet. So there's always more to learn. And I really love that. I love being a student of life, and fly fishing is definitely humbling, and it teaches me a lot of patience. Um, but it also shows me that there's so much more that I still have to learn, and I like that.
What about steelhead? Are they on the radar for you?
I have fished for steelhead the first time actually intentionally this past year. I have caught steelhead before, but unintentionally when I fished in New York for kings and brown trout. But this year was the first time I went to fish steelhead intentionally. And I in the US there's a whole thing about landlocked steelhead and then steelhead coming from the ocean and being in the Pacific Northwest. So I wasn't fishing for steelhead in the Pacific Northwest, but I was fishing for lake run steelhead. But I had a ball. It was fantastic. To see how many fish sit in some of those holes while they're going upstream is it's really surprising. It kind of marries back to when I went to Alaska. It reminds me of Alaska fishing, but in Pennsylvania. There are just so many different kinds of fishing in Pennsylvania. It's amazing. You can fish for brook trout that are fit in the palm of your hand, or steelhead that you have a hard time netting alone because they're so large. But it was definitely a different experience because they fight a lot harder than normal trout do, and just the sheer size and scale of them. It was very exciting. It doesn't rival kings or some other salmon, but the way that they jump out of the water, they love to put on a show. It was an experience. I would love to do it again.
It's funny what you should say about the lake run steelhead comparable, and I've been lucky enough to catch them in the Pacific Northwest. But I was watching recently, is it Robert Thompson did some films on the lake run steelhead, and I thought, wow, this looks really interesting as well. And that's the wonderful thing about the US is this great, wonderful mix of fishing that you can experience from bonefish to tarpon to steelhead to just about any salmon. It's an extraordinary mix. And that's coming back to what we were saying previously, isn't it? There's just so much to learn and so much to enjoy and experience just within your country right now.
Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot, and I have yet to even scratch the surface. So, but I mean, that's what gives me hope and keeps because there's always something else you can learn, something new you could do that I haven't done before. I mean, even if I'm just going on my local water, looking outside today, it is snowing very hard, and trying to find water that I would fish today that isn't frozen, and what how the water moves and how the fish move and where they sit in winter is different in certain areas, especially around where I live, than where they do in the summer. So because they're looking for more oxygenated water. So it's always a challenge. Even if I'm fishing my home water that I fished my whole life, I'm still learning every time I go out.
And I love the way that you talk about your home water as well. And I often say in here, there's no place like home. There's no place like home.
That's very true.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I wanted to move on to the art side of things as well, because it is nicely intertwined with the fish as well. And you studied at Rochester Institute of Technology with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration. Was this the direction you always wanted your life to take?
I always wanted to be an artist ever since I was a kid. I felt like I knew that's what I was going to do. Realistically, though, I didn't see that happening. I have a degree in illustration, but I minored in marketing, advertising, and public relations because I didn't think this would be something that I would be able to do for a living. And just the way it kind of fell into my lap, I was very lucky and did not see that coming. But I worked in advertising for a while, and I kind of figured that was something I'd be doing for the rest of my life. But yeah, I got very lucky.
I really like the way, though, that you stuck with it. And I think of our daughter very often, that she's very artistic and she's a photographer now. But when she was younger, she was sketching the whole time. Yes, she had a camera as well, but she was doing that the whole time. And I've got some artwork from when she was very young behind me. but you sort of, that can take you in a different direction. And it sounds to me as though you moved away from it a little bit, but then snapped yourself back into it. Was that something that you said you were in New York? So I guess you reached a stage where you said, right, okay, it's now time for me to take my life in a new direction. Would that be correct?
Oh, so I didn't intentionally make a decision consciously to leave my day jobs when I did. Um, it wasn't something I had just been posting work that I've been doing for my fly tying area online and the flies that I was tying. And it's kind of when Instagram started. So it reached a lot more people when Instagram was sequential instead of going through the algorithm. And I started getting a following that way online. But when I posted some paintings that I'd made for my fly tying areas, when it really took off. And I honestly didn't really think it was something that I still would ever do for a living. I just thought it was great that people were able to see my artwork and it was online, and that was nice. It gets some recognition that way. But I had two part-time day jobs that I was working because I couldn't find a full-time job at the time. Um, but I wasn't planning on leaving. I liked the stability of working for someone else, and when I get home from work, that's it. It's my time. Running my own business, when I decided to do that, my commissions had lined up over 2 years in advance. I had to make a decision and I decided to bet on me. And that was 15 years ago. So, but it's been an eye opening experience. Uh, it's made me realize just how strong of a person I am. And it takes a lot of grit to want to be a small business owner alone. So, but I think it's made me a lot stronger of a person. And I've learned a lot about myself in the journey, and I wouldn't change it for the world. It's fantastic. I'm just lucky to be able to do it every day.
I like that a lot. Absolutely fantastic. How did it feel when you sold that first piece?
Um, it was kind of surreal. I think the first paintings that I sold, the first one went to Japan, and I thought that was very interesting because it was of a brook trout, and I would have thought like maybe a cherry salmon or something like that would sell in Japan, but I just found it interesting that they wanted to purchase a brook trout oil painting. Um, but it was definitely a surreal moment for me. And then when I started licensing my work and realizing how many people wanted to license my work, it was very validating. It made me feel like I was doing something right in my artwork, especially because the style that I use and the style that I'm known for, I have drawn that way since I was a kid. And I think I have imposter syndrome to that effect because to go to a private college for fine art and get a degree, to then make a living the way I drew when I was a kid, I find it I find it interesting. And I never really saw it as a style either. It's just, I just always called it doodling. I would just doodle designs like that in all my sketchbooks, and I didn't really think much of it. I didn't know that I had a style. Um, and it was very eye opening to realize that because it had just been, it's weird whenever you think, when you're looking through things through someone else's eyes, because from my perspective, that was my norm. That was my everyday, drawing that way. I just saw it constantly. I didn't think much of it. I didn't know that it wasn't out there until social media started coming and I started putting it out there and realizing that it is something unique and it is something different and it is something not a lot of people do and or know how to do or take the time to do. And yeah, I thought that was really cool. So, but like I said, it's definitely different than a lot of my other work though. So, but it's just fun and it's whimsical and I enjoy drawing that way. It's just always something I've done. I've been drawing this way since I'm going to age myself here. over 30 years now. So yeah, I just think it's really interesting.
It's absolutely fantastic. And we're going to come on to working in the fly fishing industry shortly. But have you sort of found that getting that work out there, the social media, the timing must have been useful from that point of view and the way that it used to work. But also, I'm thinking about that, your work and how it must work fabulously well with social media as well. And I'm thinking about listeners as well. I'm sure most of them will know your work, but how would you describe it for somebody who's not seen it before?
I would describe it as that's a tough one. How would I describe my work? I would describe it as vibrant, as hopeful, as exciting, as busy. It is very busy. Um, Yet there's something calming in the abstraction and the chaos. I would say it's organized chaos.
Well, I love it. I love it. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. And you talked about the licensing, and listeners won't be able to see this, but I can see a bunch of able reels behind you as well. That
Oh,
must
yeah.
be, they're absolutely stunning as well. And that must be a useful way of getting your work and your, obviously for their product, but also for yourself and finding sales as a result of that as well. That must have been good for you. Have you worked with many brands?
I've worked with a lot of brands. Yes, over the last 15 years, it's been a lot, and I've been very lucky to be able to work with some absolutely wonderful companies. But Able Reels, I definitely am a big fan of them. They let me basically do whatever I want. There's no restrictions. They say whatever you want to do. If you want to do a reel, let us know what you want. Send over the artwork, which is amazing because it gives me so much more freedom than I have with a lot of other clients that I have. We want something very specific. And I love working with Able because they don't give me any restrictions. They say, do whatever you want. They leave all the artistic creativity up to me. And I think that's a lot more fun. So I think some of my work on Able Reels is a bit more reaching than what I may do for some other clients.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to go to their factory a number of years ago when they were in Camarillo, and seeing what goes into these things. And I think people sometimes imagine these are huge, huge companies, and the business there at that time was relatively small. And the word that, or the description I thought of at the time of the where they did the anodizing, because I wasn't allowed in there, but it was very Willy Wonka in what they were doing there. Have you ever got along there, and have you got to see it?
I haven't seen it, but they're very secretive of the way that they analyze things, and I don't blame them.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think a lot of people don't realize that the reels are hand painted. So they're actually artists that sit down and paint each one by hand, which I think is phenomenal. And I kind of joke with the guys at Able because when I graduated from college, I was looking for a job and I applied to be a painter at Able. And I never heard back, and I still give them a hard time about it to this day. So, which would be amusing, kind of how everything turned around. But the artists there are so amazing. They have the ability to have that sort of just stability in their hands to paint such detailed small areas is really I honestly I don't know if I even would have been able to do that, to have that much um I'm reaching for the word just control and stability over being able to paint that small. I think it's really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how does that feel to you then, as the artist, seeing your work painted, or your designs and your work painted by someone else onto the reel? Do you look at it in that way, or do you just think, right, yes, this is fantastic, I'm really happy with how it looks? Or do you look at it with a slightly more critical eye?
Oh, I definitely would still look at it with a critical eye because I would like to look at it and think, oh, if I did it, I would do it this way. But at the same time, I don't know how they do what they do. So I don't think there's anything I could do to make it any better than what they're doing right now. They have it down to a science. But I would be definitely interested to see just how they do it and how they paint and be able to watch them paint. I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, they wouldn't let me in, so that doesn't mean anything at all. But certainly, I wasn't getting a look in there. So, and I wanted to move around a little bit to this to say, I've been in and around fly fishing in the UK for a long, long time now, and it's a small and difficult market to operate in. The US is, of course, bigger, but it's still challenging. Do you find that, and the amount of time it takes to be accepted for people to see your artwork? Were there any moments where you thought, wow, this is tougher than I thought it was going to be? Or it seems to me that your determination and professionalism have just continued to keep you pushing onwards. But is it as difficult there as it is in the UK?
It's different. That's hard for me to say because I'm not sure what it's like there. There
It's
is,
tough.
yeah. The thing is, I think to be honest, I mean, it's been tough for me. Uh, but I think everything that you want to fight for and your dreams that you want to follow are going to be tough. It's going to really test how much you want it. And there were years, I mean, years and years where it was 6, 7 days a week, 16-hour days, just head down, keep going, get through this. And I think a lot of people don't really have that passion or that the realization that that is the way that it is. And if you don't really want to work for it, you won't. So it really comes down to what matters to you. Uh, I think in the US, there's so many different types of fishing that people do here and so many different species they can target that artists can be known, I think, more easily for certain the areas that they live in. It's kind of broken down. There are more artists in the South that do more saltwater stuff. I'm an artist in the North. I do more freshwater. There are more out west that do more stuff that has to do with Alaska. So finding what works for you and finding your place in all of that, I think was a little challenging at first. I've had some people ask me to do some fish that I've never caught. So I would have to rely on talking to some of my photographer friends and getting images from them. But at the same time, I want to convey a piece or a species the way it feels whenever you catch it. And to have never caught a fish that I'm drawing or painting is difficult. But I think that's part of the difficulties in being in the US as a fly fishing artist. But I would say overall, anything you want to do is going to be hard. It depends on how much determination you have to stick with it. And I've just had that determination to not give up, so I haven't.
Like your style, I'm similar in that regard. I've seen many times over the years that people who have burnt brightly for a short time and then disappeared. Yet there are people that have stuck around this industry a whole bunch of years, and we're lucky to have people like yourself and many others within this industry that are continually driving it on. And you touched on the social media a little bit there, and the way that you approach that, I think, is unique and interesting, that keeps your followers and potential customers engaged the whole time. Is that something you're giving a lot of time and effort to?
Oh, on a daily basis, yes. Social media is a necessity when you're running a small business, especially one that is online and doesn't have really much of a presence, like as far as the storefront goes for me. It's not like I go on the stream and hand out business cards. So to find my followers, it's going to be online. So social media definitely takes a lot of time during the day to now film for edit films and reels and photos to post online because I mean, when it comes down to it, that is what customers are really buying from you is what they're seeing on your social media. And it's difficult to take a lot of time to do that, but it's absolutely a necessity.
Yeah. And you talked about getting commissions from people fish that you haven't caught. So it's been challenging to do that. But is there a fish that you've yet to capture that you would love to on in an artistic format?
Fish that I have yet to catch, I would say an imago, a cherry salmon. I would love to go to Japan and fish for those. They're so beautiful and they look so different than any fish I've caught. And something about them intrigues me. And being able to fish for them under, cherry trees blossoming is something I think would just be an entirely surreal, amazing experience. So that fish is definitely on my bucket list for sure. That's my number one.
And would that go as a dream destination then, Japan, or is there somewhere else that you thought, oh, actually, I'd like to cast a fly?
Japan would definitely be up there as well as New Zealand. I would love to fly fish in New Zealand. I see so many beautiful fish from posts of friends of mine that have I've seen online and it's such a different environment than here. I feel like that would be amazing. That's definitely on my list as well.
How about saltwater?
Saltwater, I would definitely have to say, I think it would be really cool to fish for giant trevally. They seem like they are just as belligerent and stubborn as I am and difficult. So for some reason, I feel like there's this innate sense drawing me to that fish that I feel like I need to experience in my lifetime. That may be very weird to say, but that I feel like they're calling towards me, and yeah, at some point I'm going to need to fish for giant trevally.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. And I was thinking about coming back to what you were saying about social media and those sorts of things. Does that mean then you visit shows and things? Is there? So it strikes me that there are, the Denver show and some others. Have you ever been along to those? And are they of something of interest to you?
Yes, I did do the show circuit on the East Coast for a few years actually, and I really enjoyed getting to meet a lot of new people, and it was fantastic. As of late, I haven't gone to them just because I just haven't really been able to find the time. That it kind of didn't really become as much of a priority. Although I would like to start going again because I do miss seeing some people. Those are the only chances I get to see them is going to the shows. But they are a lot of fun, and it's great that we have those here as well. And there's so many. So I also had my own little art and angling fishing show in Western Pennsylvania that I held for a few years, and that was a lot of fun too. I think it brings the community together, and it's nice to see people who are doing other amazing things in fly fishing that a lot of other people may not be aware of. So I just wanted to bring attention to that.
Nice. I like the sound of that. And with the show, then, does that mean that you're interacting with your end user, your buyer of art, in a slightly different way, in a face to face format rather than an email? Is that different and more pleasing in some respects?
Oh, definitely. 100%. And you get to talk more about fishing in person. You actually get to have more of a conversation with someone than in an email. I feel like everything's abbreviated. It's kind of like get to the point. If someone reaches out to me, they want to work for something, they'll get to the point pretty quickly. But you miss the nuance of it. And in person, it's just really nice to have conversations with people and get to see their reactions to my work, which I don't see on a daily basis. I work my studio is in a spare bedroom and I work in here. I put artwork out into the world and it just kind of disappears. I don't really see where it goes. I don't know what happens after that. It's like it's just gone. So to be able to speak to someone in person and see them in person is like see the reaction that my art gives them and how much joy it's brought them, or they tell me stories about fish they caught that were the same species of something I painted or drawn. To have that connection with someone who enjoys my work is definitely much more an impactful experience than sending something through email. And it really, a lot of them over the years have stuck with me, and I still draw inspiration from those comments to this day.
Yeah, that's fantastic to hear. Well, we're going to start to wind things down a little bit now, but I want to come back to the fishing very, very briefly. And you talked about blue lining, you've talked about fishing the way that you would like to do. What is the perfect day on the water for you? How does it start, and how does it play out for you?
I would say my perfect day on the water would just be maybe partly cloudy, so the fish aren't super spooky. um, but it would be middle, late spring, so that's not too warm that you have to have like, it's not so cold you have to have a bunch of layers on, but it's not so hot that you can't be comfortable. And I would say it would probably be on a spring fed, like limestone stream with wild brown trout, and good company would be very nice. Someone who also enjoys the water. Um, and I think it would definitely involve, I also sometimes bring plein air paint with me when I'm fishing, and I just keep it in my bag. So it would probably involve just sitting on the bank for a while and taking it all in and watching fish hit the surface for dry flies and painting and staying until the evening hatches come off. I think that's my favorite. I think a lot of people leave the water before the evening hatches start, and I like to stay until after dark to see that happen. So if it would to be in the spring, then that would be my perfect day on the water.
Nice. And if you're fishing with someone, do you like to fish side by side with them, or do you say, right, let's meet up for lunch, or do you just forge ahead and do your own thing and then meet back a little bit later?
I think it depends on the water I'm fishing. If it's small water, I like to take turns. If it's like small brook trout water, because each one cast in one pocket and that's it. So I would say that on wider water, I would probably say as long as like I like to be able to see the person that I'm fishing with in case they catch something and they need a net or want a photo. So we can help each other out that way. But fishing side by side, I'm not sure, that would be a little bit more difficult. Maybe if we took turns, that would work out. But I think just being able to see someone nearby, and if you catch a fish, then you could have someone take a picture if you want one, or vice versa, because you never know when you're going to catch that one fish that you have to take a picture of, because it's like they're one in a million. And usually that's the time whenever your camera doesn't work, or you're alone, or it gets away, or it swims through the net. That's always when it happens.
And I haven't asked this question for a little bit, but fishing buddies, because that's quite an important interviewing process, isn't it? Because you sometimes think you've got it right, and then you're on the river and you think, oh man. Have you had any of those where sometimes it hasn't played out the way you thought it was going to play out?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I like to fish with my sister whenever she's in the area, and we are not the best fishing buddies. We will fight for holes, but it is funny. So, yeah, but I think that's part of the fun too. When you know the good spots, and you got to rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to get it. But that's part of the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We learn from those sometimes, and sometimes we don't. I keep getting suckered
Yeah.
by people, but yes, always a tricky one. Now, this is the question. The question you've probably been dreading. I know we talked about it off mic a little bit. Have you got a song that may go in the car on that spring day to set the tone, or a band that you really, really like, or a form of music that sets that tone for that journey to the river for the day?
There's a song that comes to mind, and I listen to a lot of heavier music, and I would have to say the song that comes to mind is Even When I'm Not With You by Pierce the Veil. Because I feel like even when I'm not on the water, I'm still able to create a lot of the stuff I do and a lot of the feelings and emotions I get through my artwork while I'm in my studio, even if I'm not fishing. So that is the first song that came to my mind whenever you said that. And when I paint or when I draw and I'm kind of in the zone, I throw on music in my headphones and I just kind of zone out. And that song for the last year has kind of just really stuck with me. So I would definitely have to pick that one.
Nice. I'm going to write that down, have a listen to it, and go from there. Andrea, how can people connect with you? What are your social media handles? How can they find you?
They can find me on social media on Instagram at Andrea Larko, AndreaLarko. They can also find me on Facebook. If you just search for Andrea Larko, there's facebook.com/art by Andrea Larko. And my website is andrealarko.com. I'm looking to move it to my own site. Right now it's on Etsy, but this year I'm translating it over to my own personal website. So andrealarko.com is my website, but right now I'll forward you to the Etsy shop.
And if you read the magazine, you'd have seen Andrea's artwork in there. I cannot shout loudly enough about it. It is interesting, it is different, and go take a look and you're going to like it. I promise you that. If companies like Able are looking at it and using it, I think that speaks volumes as well. Of course, Andrea's not asked to be on here. I've invited her along. She's not paid to be on here. It's because it's good stuff and we've got to share that with people. So I hope you'll have a look at that. You're going to enjoy it. I know had a midlife crisis part 33, I think it is. And I was looking at your Etsy site. I'm going to buy some stickers to go on my new van because they are super cool as well. So I like those very, very much. But I hope you will go take a look at that. Andrea, it's been wonderful to catch up with you. It's been wonderful to speak with you and to get an insight into your life, what fishing means to you, what art means to you, and how they're beautifully intertwined. I'd like to say a massive thank you for being a guest on the Fly Culture podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Pete. It's really been a joy.
Well, everyone, this has been the Fly Culture podcast. Thank you so much for listening. There'll never be any charge for these. I just hope you enjoy listening to people's fly fishing stories. As ever, there's going to be plenty more coming along very, very soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening.
The Fly Culture podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.